Some secrets do not stay buried. They wait for the right person to find them. The photograph should not have existed. Vincent Moretti stared at it beneath the pale glow of a desk lamp in a private records room hidden beneath one of his Manhattan office buildings. Dust floated through the still air. Old filing cabinets lined the concrete walls. Boxes filled with forgotten documents stretched into the darkness beyond the circle of light. None of that mattered anymore. His attention remained fixed on the small photograph resting in his hand. A little girl stood beside a wooden fence somewhere in the countryside. She could not have been older than 4. Blonde hair, bright eyes, a silver necklace hanging around her neck. Vincent slowly lowered himself into a chair. For the first time in years, his composure slipped. 25 years. 25 years since the fire that destroyed an entire chapter of his life. 25 years since the promises made afterward. 25 years since everyone involved had agreed the child was gone. Yet there she was, looking back at him from a photograph dated 3 years after she was supposedly lost forever. The room felt colder. Vincent reached for the second document inside the folder. His eyes moved across the page. Names, addresses, adoption records. Half of the information had been blacked out. The rest looked incomplete, almost intentionally hidden. Someone had spent years making sure this trail remained buried. But one line escaped the redactions. A name, Emma Hayes. Vincent read it twice. Then a third time. The surname meant nothing to him. The first name made his pulse quicken. Earlier that evening, he had attended a charity gala hosted by the Boston Historical Society. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom. Politicians, donors, business leaders. He had spent most of the event avoiding conversations he did not care about. Then he saw her, Emma Hayes, standing near an exhibit case discussing historical artifacts with a group of guests. Intelligent, calm, completely unaware that she had captured his attention within seconds. Not because of her smile, not because of her beauty, because of the necklace around her neck. The same necklace in the photograph. Vincent closed his eyes briefly. Logic told him this was impossible. Coincidences happened. Similar jewelry existed everywhere. But instincts had kept him alive for most of his life, and every instinct he possessed was screaming the same warning. This was not a coincidence. He opened the folder again. Another photograph slipped free and landed on the desk. This one was older, damaged, faded. Vincent picked it up carefully. His breath caught. The little girl stood beside a man whose face had been partially destroyed by time. But Vincent recognized him immediately. The man who had saved his life 25 years earlier. The man whose disappearance had haunted him ever since. Silence filled the room. Somewhere above, the city continued moving through another ordinary night. Cars crossed bridges. Lights glowed in apartment windows. People laughed in restaurants. None of them knew that a single forgotten file had just shattered everything Vincent believed about the past. He reached for his phone. His voice remained calm when the call connected. "I need everything you can find on Emma Hayes." A pause followed. "Everything?" the voice asked. Vincent looked down at the photograph one final time, especially the parts someone wanted hidden. 3 months earlier, I had no idea my life was connected to secrets buried decades before I was born. The ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Soft music drifted through the air while waiters carried silver trays between clusters of wealthy donors and museum patrons. I stood near an exhibit displaying rare historical documents from early 20th century New England, explaining the significance of a recently restored collection to a small group of guests. History had always made sense to me. Records, dates, evidence, facts carefully preserved through time. People were far more complicated. That was probably why I preferred archives to social events. "You make old paper sound exciting," a man joked. I laughed politely. "That is part of the job." The group smiled and moved on toward another exhibit. Finally alone, I exhaled in relief and reached for a glass of sparkling water. My feet already hurt. The evening was only halfway over. Across the ballroom, conversations rose and fell beneath the glow of golden light. Boston's elite loved charity galas. I tolerated them because fundraising helped preserve the collections I cared about. I had just begun considering an early escape when the atmosphere shifted. It happened so subtly most people would never notice. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Staff members straightened their posture. Curiosity pulled my gaze toward the entrance. A tall man had just entered the room. Dark suit. Calm expression. the kind of presence that seemed to alter the gravity around him. People approached him immediately. Business leaders, donors, politicians. He acknowledged them politely, but never appeared impressed by any of them. I recognized him from newspaper articles and financial magazines. Vincent Moretti. Even from across the ballroom, he seemed completely different from everyone else. Controlled, focused, unreachable. I looked away and returned my attention to the exhibit. Men like Vincent Moretti belonged to a world far removed from mine. 10 minutes later, I felt someone stop beside me. "You are Emma Hayes." The voice was deep and calm. I turned. Vincent stood there. For a moment, I forgot what I was supposed to say. Up close, he appeared even more intimidating. Not because he looked threatening, because he looked like a man who noticed everything. "That depends," I said carefully. "Are you here to donate money or ask difficult questions?" To my surprise, amusement flickered briefly across his face. "Possibly both." I smiled despite myself. "Then yes, I am Emma." His eyes shifted slightly, not toward my face, toward the necklace resting against my collarbone. It was a simple silver pendant I had worn for as long as I could remember. My adoptive mother had given it to me before she passed away. Vincent became very still. The change was almost imperceptible, but I noticed. Something in his expression tightened. "That necklace," he said quietly. "Where did you get it?" The question caught me off guard. "It belonged to my mother." "Your mother?" His voice sounded different now, more focused, more careful. "My adoptive mother," I clarified. Silence stretched between us. Around us, the gala continued. Music played. Glasses clinked. Guests laughed. Yet the moment felt strangely isolated from everything else. Vincent stared at the pendant for another second before finally looking into my eyes. Whatever he was thinking, he hit it quickly. "It is beautiful," he said. "Thank you." He nodded once. Then someone called his name from across the room. The spell broke instantly. Vincent stepped back. "Enjoy your evening, Emma." "You too." He walked away. But before disappearing into the crowd, he glanced back one final time. Not at me, at the necklace. And for reasons I could not explain, a chill moved through me. Because it looked less like curiosity and more like recognition. For the next several weeks, I tried to forget the way Vincent Moretti had looked at my necklace. Rationally, there was no reason to dwell on it. People asked questions about old jewelry all the time, historians especially. Yet every time I replayed the conversation in my mind, something felt wrong. Not threatening, not dangerous, familiar, as though he had seen a ghost standing beside me and had not known what to do with the discovery. Life returned to normal, or at least it appeared to. My days were filled with archive inventories, restoration projects, and planning upcoming exhibits for the museum. Stacks of historical records occupied most of my attention. Dust-covered ledgers, family letters, forgotten photographs. The irony was not lost on me. I spent my life helping people uncover the past while knowing almost nothing about my own. I had been adopted as an infant. That was all I really knew. My adoptive mother rarely discussed the circumstances. Whenever I asked questions, her answers remained vague. Not secretive, sad, as if the memories carried more weight than she wanted me to inherit. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was cataloging documents in a quiet storage room beneath the museum when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, I ignored unknown callers. Something made me answer. "Emma Hayes. You answer strange numbers more often than most people." I froze. I recognized the voice immediately. Vincent Moretti. For several seconds, I simply stared at the shelves surrounding me. "Should I be concerned that you somehow found my number?" A pause followed. Then a faint trace of amusement entered his voice. "You work for a museum. You understand research." Despite myself, I smiled. "That is not an answer." "No, it is not." Rain tapped softly against a small basement window. The conversation should have felt awkward. Instead, it felt strangely easy. "Why are you calling?" I finally asked. Silence lingered for a moment. "I have a question." "Another one about my necklace?" This time the silence lasted longer. Long enough to confirm I had guessed correctly. My stomach tightened. "It is important to you." "Yes." His answer came immediately. No hesitation. No attempt to hide it. "Why?" More silence. Then he surprised me. "I do not know yet." The honesty caught me completely off guard. Most people would have invented an explanation. Vincent simply admitted the truth. He did not understand it either. Somehow that unsettled me more than any answer could have. Over the next month, our paths crossed several times. Sometimes at museum events. Sometimes at charity functions. Once at a historical preservation fundraiser where we spent nearly an hour discussing architecture instead of the mystery hanging between us. Every encounter raised more questions than it answered. Vincent remained careful, observant, curious, yet never intrusive, at least not openly. Then one evening, everything changed. I arrived home after work and found a package sitting outside my apartment door. No return address. No note. My pulse quickened immediately. The box was small, plain, unremarkable. I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. Then I opened it. Inside rested a photograph. Nothing else. No explanation. No letter. Just a single photograph. My breath caught. A little girl stood beside a wooden fence somewhere in the countryside. Blonde hair, bright eyes, a silver necklace around her neck. The same necklace hanging around my neck at that exact moment. My hands began trembling. I turned the photograph over. Written on the back in faded ink were 4 words. Summer, 1998. Emma, age 4. The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too cold, because I had never seen that photograph before, and I had absolutely no idea who sent it. The photograph sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I finally called Vincent. I wish I could say I spent those 3 days calmly analyzing the situation like the trained historian I was. I did not. I stared at the picture every morning before work, every evening before bed. Every time I looked at it, new questions appeared. Who took it? Where was it taken? Why had nobody shown it to me before? Most importantly, who had sent it? Deep down, I already suspected the answer. Vincent picked up on the first ring. Emma. The way he said my name immediately confirmed he had been expecting my call. You know about the photograph. Silence. Not surprise. Not confusion. Confirmation. Yes, he said quietly. My grip tightened around the phone. Rain tapped against my apartment windows while traffic hummed below on the street. You sent it? No. The answer came immediately. Then how do you know about it? Another pause followed. I could almost picture him standing in one of his office towers overlooking Manhattan, carefully choosing every word. Because I have one exactly like it. My breath caught. The room suddenly felt smaller. What? Emma, there are things I need to show you. Every instinct warned me to refuse. Every rational part of my brain reminded me that I barely knew this man. Yet curiosity had already become stronger than caution. 2 days later, I found myself stepping into a private archive room hidden beneath one of Vincent's office buildings. The space looked more like a museum vault than a corporate storage facility. Climate-controlled shelves stretched across the room. Thousands of documents rested inside carefully labeled boxes. History preserved in silence. Vincent stood beside a large wooden table when I arrived. Dark suit, calm expression, yet something about him seemed different. More serious, more uncertain. As though he had reached the edge of a mystery he could no longer control. Without speaking, he slid a photograph across the table. My pulse quickened. It was identical to the one sitting in my apartment. Same fence, same field, same little girl. Me. How did you get this? I asked. It belonged to someone I knew a long time ago. Vincent's gaze remained fixed on the photograph. Someone important. I looked up. Who? For several seconds he said nothing. Then he opened a nearby folder. Inside were dozens of documents. Newspaper clippings, census records, property records, adoption paperwork. Many contained highlighted notes written in neat handwriting. His handwriting. I have spent 3 months investigating your past, he said. The admission should have alarmed me. Instead, I felt strangely numb. Perhaps because I already knew. Nobody asks that many questions about a necklace without searching for answers. And I asked quietly. Vincent exhaled slowly. And nothing makes sense. He handed me another document. It contained information about my adoption. Most of it matched what I already knew. Then I reached the final page. My eyes stopped. This cannot be right. Vincent nodded. I had the same reaction. According to the record, my adoption file had been amended twice. Entire sections were missing. Several names had been removed. Dates conflicted with other official records. It looked less like paperwork and more like a puzzle someone had intentionally broken apart. Who would do this? I whispered. Vincent looked toward the shelves surrounding us. Toward decades of preserved history. Toward evidence that rarely lied. Someone who wanted you to disappear. The words settled heavily between us. A chill ran down my spine. Historians spend their lives uncovering forgotten stories. Yet standing there, I realized something terrifying. My own story might have been hidden on purpose. Then Vincent opened one final folder. Inside rested a faded photograph of a man I had never seen before. The moment I looked at his face, Vincent's expression changed. "Emma," he said quietly, "I think this man is the reason your entire past was erased." The photograph followed me everywhere after that meeting. It sat on my desk at work. It occupied my thoughts during staff meetings. It waited beside my bed at night. The stranger's face had become impossible to ignore. Every time I looked at him, I felt something I could not explain. Not recognition, not memory, something deeper. A strange sense of connection that refused to disappear. 3 days later, I found myself standing inside my apartment storage closet, surrounded by old boxes I had not opened in years. Dust covered everything. Holiday decorations, college textbooks, family photo albums. If answers existed, I was determined to find them myself. For most of my life, I had accepted the gaps in my history. Now those gaps felt deliberate, dangerous, like missing pages torn from a book before I was allowed to read it. Hours passed as I sorted through forgotten belongings. Then I found it, a small wooden box tucked beneath a stack of blankets. My pulse quickened immediately. I recognized it. It had belonged to my adoptive mother. She rarely let anyone touch it. After she passed away, I stored it away without ever opening it. Until now, the latch clicked softly beneath my fingers. Inside rested several letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Beneath them sat a worn leather journal. My breath caught. I carefully opened the first page. The handwriting belonged to my mother. There was no doubt. The entry was dated 22 years earlier. I sat down on the floor and began reading. At first, the journal contained ordinary observations about raising a child, school memories, birthday celebrations, family trips. Then the tone changed. Several pages later, I found a passage that made my heart stop. If Emma ever reads this, she deserves to know that I kept my promise. I closed my eyes briefly. My hands trembled. Promise. The same word appeared several times throughout the journal. Yet my mother never explained who made the promise or why it mattered. I continued reading. Entry after entry hinted at secrets she had spent years protecting. Names were never written. Locations remained vague. Entire pages appeared intentionally removed. Someone had edited the story before I found it. Then a folded piece of paper slipped from between 2 pages and landed in my lap. My pulse accelerated. It was a photograph. Another one. This time the image showed my adoptive mother standing beside the same man Vincent had shown me. They looked younger, happier, familiar. On the back, written in fading ink, were 6 words. "Thank you for saving her life." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. I stared at the sentence again and again. Saving her life. My life. Suddenly, the mystery felt larger than missing records and altered paperwork. Someone had protected me. Someone had sacrificed something for me. I grabbed my phone and immediately called Vincent. He answered before the second ring. "Emma, I found something." Silence. Then his voice sharpened. "What did you find?" 45 minutes later, we sat across from each other in his private archive room. Rain hammered against the windows above while I placed the photograph and journal on the table between us. Vincent studied them carefully. The longer he looked, the more serious his expression became. Finally, he turned to one particular journal entry and stopped. His eyes narrowed. "What is it?" I asked. Instead of answering, he slid the journal toward me and pointed to a single sentence buried near the bottom of the page. I read it once, then twice. Cold spread through my chest. The sentence contained only 7 words. "If anything happens, call Vincent Moretti." I slowly looked up. Vincent was already staring back at me. Neither of us spoke. Because for the first time since this began, the mystery was no longer connecting me to his past. It was connecting my past directly to him. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Rain continued striking the windows above the archive room, while the journal lay open between us like evidence in a trial neither of us expected to face. I looked down at the sentence again. "If anything happens, call Vincent Moretti." 7 words. That was all. Yet they carried enough weight to change everything. "How is this possible?" I asked quietly. Vincent remained silent. His gaze stayed fixed on the page. For the first time since I met him, he looked genuinely unsettled. Not confused. Not surprised. Haunted. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "I have not seen that handwriting in 25 years." The answer sent a chill through me. You knew my mother? No. He paused. But I knew the man who gave her that journal. The room suddenly felt smaller. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. Vincent stood and walked toward a nearby cabinet. He unlocked a drawer and removed an old photograph. The edges were worn from age. The image showed 3 people standing together in front of a small farmhouse. One was the man from the faded picture. Another was my adoptive mother, much younger than I remembered. The third person was Vincent himself, not the powerful businessman sitting across from me now. A teenager. Serious. Thin. Looking far too young to carry the sadness visible in his eyes. I stared at the photograph. This was taken before I was born. Vincent nodded. Several years before. He placed the photograph beside the journal. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Same faces. Same location. Same mystery connecting everything together. Who was he? I asked, pointing to the man standing between them. Vincent looked at the photograph for several seconds before answering. His name was Daniel Hayes. My breath caught. Hayes. My surname. The realization hit immediately. You think he was related to me? Vincent's expression tightened. I think he may have been much more than that. Silence settled over the room. Somewhere in the building, an elevator door opened and closed. The distant sound echoed through the quiet. I looked down at the photograph again. The man smiled directly at the camera. There was something familiar about him. Something I could not explain. Then Vincent opened another folder and removed a document. This one looked newer than the others. A recent investigative report. Several paragraphs had been highlighted. My team found this yesterday. I accepted the file and began reading. Halfway down the second page, my stomach dropped. Daniel Hayes had disappeared 25 years earlier. Official records classified the case as unresolved. No body, no confirmed location, no explanation, simply gone. Yet witnesses reported seeing him days before his disappearance with a small child. A blonde girl approximately 4 years old. My hands started trembling. Me? Vincent nodded. That is what I believe. I looked away, struggling to process everything. My entire life had been built on assumptions. Adoption records, family stories, fragments of information I never questioned. Now those fragments were collapsing one by one. Why would someone erase all of this? Vincent broke the seal with remarkable care, as though the fragile envelope contained something far more valuable than paper. Maybe it did. 25 years of unanswered questions rested inside. 25 years of missing history. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in the silence of the archive room. Rain continued falling outside, while Vincent unfolded the letter and began reading. At first, neither of us spoke. His eyes moved slowly across the page. Then his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. Surprise, sadness, regret. Emotions so rare on his face that they felt almost shocking. What does it say? I asked quietly. Vincent did not answer immediately. Instead, he handed me the letter. My fingers trembled as I accepted it. The handwriting matched the journal. Careful, precise, familiar. I began reading. Vincent, if you are reading this, then something has happened that I prayed would never happen. If Emma has found her way back into this story, then the truth could no longer stay hidden. My breath caught. I continued. The letter explained more in a single page than I had learned during the previous 3 months. Daniel Hayes had been my father. Not adoptive, not symbolic. My actual father. The man in the photographs. The man who vanished. The man whose existence had somehow been erased from my life. I kept reading. 25 years earlier, Daniel discovered information powerful people wanted buried forever. He believed exposing it would place his family in danger. To protect his daughter, he arranged for her identity to disappear. New records. New guardians. A new life. My adoptive mother agreed to raise me as her own. Everything had been planned. Everything had been intentional. Tears blurred the words on the page. Not because I was sad. Because an absence I had carried my entire life suddenly had a shape. A name. A face. I finally understood why my mother had always looked heartbroken whenever I asked about my past. She had not been hiding the truth from me. She had been protecting a promise. Then I reached the final paragraph. The room seemed to disappear around me. Vincent, if Emma ever returns, there is one thing you must know. She was never the debt. She was the reason for the debt. I slowly lowered the page. What does that mean? Vincent stared at the table. His jaw tightened. For several seconds, I thought he might refuse to answer. Then he spoke. When I was 13, I made a mistake. His voice remained calm, but something beneath it felt raw. A serious one. I listened without interrupting. Your father saved me from the consequences of that mistake. His gaze remained fixed on the letter. He lost everything afterward. The words settled heavily between us. Because of you? I whispered. Vincent closed his eyes briefly. Because he chose to help me. Silence followed. I looked at the photographs scattered across the table. My father smiling beside Vincent. My mother standing beside them both. A moment frozen in time before everything changed. Suddenly, I understood why Vincent had been so obsessed with finding answers. This was not curiosity. It was guilt. 25 years of guilt. Then Vincent reached into the folder and removed one final document. A legal agreement dated 25 years earlier. Signed by Daniel Hayes. Signed by my adoptive mother. Signed by Vincent Moretti. I stared at the signatures. You knew? Vincent nodded once. Not who you became. His voice softened. But I knew you existed. My breath caught. You spent 25 years looking for me. For the first time since opening the letter, Vincent looked directly into my eyes. The answer appeared there before he spoke. I never stopped. The words stayed with me long after we left the archive room. I never stopped. Vincent had spoken them quietly, yet they echoed louder than every revelation that came before. For 25 years, while I built a life believing my history had simply been lost, someone had been searching for the missing pieces. Someone had been carrying a promise that was never supposed to become his burden. The following week passed in a blur. Reporters, museum meetings, and daily responsibilities continued exactly as before, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every ordinary moment existed beside an extraordinary truth. I found myself studying old photographs during lunch breaks, reading journal entries late into the night, looking at my reflection and wondering which features belonged to the father I had never known. One evening, Vincent invited me to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Charles River. It was not a grand event. No security teams hovering nearby. No business associates. Just the two of us sitting beside large windows while city lights shimmered across the water. For the first time since discovering the truth, neither of us talked about documents or investigations. We talked about everything else. My work, his travels, books, childhood memories. The conversation felt surprisingly easy, comfortable, as though the mystery connecting us had finally stopped standing between us. At one point, I laughed at something he said and noticed him smiling. Really smiling. Not the controlled expression he showed the rest of the world. Something warmer. Something genuine. The realization caught me off guard. So did the way my pulse reacted. Later that evening, as we walked along the riverfront beneath strings of lights reflecting on the water, Vincent became unusually quiet. The cold air carried the scent of rain. Autumn leaves drifted across the sidewalk. Finally, he stopped walking. There is something I have not told you. My stomach tightened. That is becoming a habit. A faint smile appeared before fading again. The agreement your father signed contained another condition. I looked at him carefully. What condition? Vincent stared out across the river. If you were ever found, I was supposed to stay away. The answer stunned me. What? Your father believed the safest future for you was one completely separated from my world. Silence settled between us. The city glowed around us while the river moved slowly through the darkness. Then why did you contact me? I asked. Vincent exhaled slowly. Because I broke the rule. The honesty in his voice left no room for misunderstanding. When I saw the necklace at the gala, I should have walked away. His eyes met mine. Instead, I started looking for answers. I understood then. The conflict was never about finding me. The conflict was about what happened afterward. Every step Vincent had taken since the gala moved further away from the promise he made 25 years earlier. Do you regret it? I asked quietly. For several seconds, he simply looked at me. The noise of the city seemed to disappear. The passing cars, the distant conversations, the movement of water below. Everything faded. No, he said. One word. Simple. Certain. My heart stumbled unexpectedly. Vincent looked away first. Not because he was uncomfortable, because the answer carried more meaning than either of us was ready to discuss. Then his phone rang. The sound shattered the moment instantly. He glanced at the screen. The warmth disappeared from his expression. Concern replaced it. What is it? I asked. Vincent listened to the caller for several seconds before ending the conversation. His jaw tightened. Someone accessed one of the sealed records from your adoption file this afternoon. A chill moved through me. I thought those records were hidden. They were. His expression darkened with concern, which means someone else is searching for the same truth we just uncovered. The following days felt strangely calm. Not because the questions disappeared. If anything, there were more questions than ever. But after spending months chasing fragments of my past, I finally knew the truth that mattered most. I knew who my father was. I knew why my history had been hidden. And I knew that somewhere along the way, Vincent Moretti had become more than a man connected to my family's story. He had become part of my future. The investigation into the accessed adoption records continued quietly. Vincent's team discovered that someone had requested information using credentials connected to a legal archive that no longer existed. The trail ended almost immediately. No names, no explanations, just another mystery added to a lifetime of mysteries. Surprisingly, I found that it no longer controlled me the way it once would have. Some answers mattered, others did not. For the first time in my life, I felt complete without knowing every detail. A month later, Vincent asked me to accompany him somewhere. He refused to explain where we were going. The drive carried us several hours outside the city. Autumn had fully surrendered to winter. Bare trees lined quiet roads while patches of snow covered open fields. Eventually, we turned onto a narrow country lane surrounded by rolling hills. My heart began racing before the car even stopped. Something about the place felt familiar despite knowing I had never consciously seen it before. Vincent opened my door and offered his hand. I accepted it without hesitation. Together, we walked across a small field toward an old wooden fence. The moment I saw it, my breath caught. The fence from the photographs. The same one. Time seemed to collapse around me. The little girl standing beside the fence. The necklace around her neck. The life that vanished before I was old enough to remember it. Everything suddenly felt real. Beyond the fence stood a modest farmhouse. Empty now. Quiet. Preserved by time. Vincent stopped beside me. Neither of us spoke for several moments. The winter wind moved gently through the grass. Finally, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. "What is this?" I asked. "The last document your father left behind." My pulse quickened as I unfolded it. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. Daniel Hayes. I began reading. Unlike the letter Vincent received years ago, this one was addressed to me. "Emma, if you are reading this, then you grew up exactly the way I hoped. Safe, free, able to choose your own future. That was all I ever wanted for you." Tears blurred the words. I continued reading slowly. My father wrote about ordinary things. The sound of my laughter. My favorite bedtime story. The way I used to carry a small stuffed rabbit everywhere I went. Memories so simple they felt priceless. Then I reached the final paragraph. "If you ever meet Vincent Moretti again, remember something important. He will spend his life believing he owes us a debt. He is wrong. Saving people is not a debt. It is a choice. And some choices deserve gratitude, not guilt." I lowered the letter. The silence between Vincent and me felt different now. Lighter. Freed from the weight both of us had been carrying. He stared out across the field. "I spent 25 years trying to repay something I could never repay." His voice was quiet. Honest. I know. For the first time since meeting him, there was nothing left hidden between us. No missing records. No sealed files. No forgotten promises. Only the truth. Vincent looked at me. The winter sunlight reflected softly in his eyes. "What happens now?" he asked. I smiled through the tears. Then I folded my father's letter carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket. "Now," I said, taking his hand, "we stop living in the past." Together, we turned away from the farmhouse and started walking toward the future. Behind us stood the place where the story began. Ahead of us waited everything else. Because empires fade. Secrets disappear. Even history eventually becomes memory. But the people who choose to stay become the reason the story matters at all.